What's up guys, it's ENDYMION, and there's been some news surrounding Amazon's next season of Rings of Power that has the community up in arms, and rightfully so. And this then brings up another concern. Since Amazon is willing to go down this path with Lord of the Rings, is Warhammer next? I'll also talk about how companies are using consulting firms to ruin and morph your favorite properties for diversity points. Anyway, let's begin. This massive exclusive scoop comes from the Lord of the Rings fan website Fellowship of Fans, who reported that Sauron will now be played by an Indian man named Cavill Singh Chera. Already, Amazon's second season to their despised Rings of Power show is off to another awful start. The original show was plagued with identity politics and strong girl bosses, but now they've went ahead and race swapped the Dark Lord himself, and it's not the gotcha these weirdos think it is. Especially when you take this massive leak and put it up against what's been said already. Previously, back in 2022, Lindsay Weber, who's one of the producers of Rings of Power, told Vanity Fair this: "It felt only natural to us that an adaptation of Tolkien's work would reflect what the world actually looks like. Tolkien is for everyone. His stories are about his fictional races doing their best work when they leave the isolation of their own cultures and come together." And this quote is hilarious considering what she's really saying is that we need diversity, and the world of Tolkien needs to reflect the world and represent people of all colors. Never mind that Lord of the Rings is based on Britain and its customs. Stop that, you're being racist. Rings is about diversity now, and this gotcha is a huge oof when you think about it. You wanted the world to be represented, you took one look at Sauron and went, well, he's a bad guy. And we need this bad guy to accurately represent what bad people look like in the real world. And they, in their infinite woke wisdom, looked at a brown guy and went, hey, that works, he's perfect for a bad guy. Oh, these people are so out of touch, it's crazy. This reminds me of when Netflix's producers were talking about The Witcher, and Sophie Holland, the casting director of that dumpster fire, was quoted saying that they casted Anya Chalotra as Yennefer not because she fitted the role, but to challenge beauty standards. Holland said, and I quote, "I am always the first to champion diversity in all of its glory. One that springs to mind was the character of Yennefer on The Witcher. Lauren Hissrich is the showrunner, and we work so well together, and she's so open to conversations. In the book, she's described as the most beautiful woman in the world. This was a few years ago, and I like to think things have changed. But when you think about people's unconscious bias, especially in the fantasy world, it felt like these worlds were predominantly white. And I remember saying, I feel like we need to challenge what people think of as the standard of beauty. And having a woman of color in this role does incredibly powerful things to the people watching," end quote. I love it when these woke activists tell on themselves like this, and The Witcher's producers feel very much as being in the same mindset when you compare them to Rings of Power's creators. These idiots looked at the actor for Yennefer and went, well, most people only find white women attractive apparently. So naturally, we're gonna cast someone we don't think is as attractive in order to pander. Like, excuse me? Imagine being Anya reading that headline and realizing that you're being used as a purse puppy in order to push agendas. Oh, you didn't get the role because you're a beautiful woman. Nah, you got hired because you're not what people find attractive. I mean, according to our gender studies viewpoints anyway. That's insanely racist and ridiculous, but this is what that Sauron casting feels like. They took one look at the Dark Lord and went, well, we need the world to reflect society. So our evil, scheming Sauron who blows people up and tortures creatures out of sheer spite has to reflect that. So they made him brown. Jesus Christ, dude. And this is what I mean when I say it's not us who's racist, but the people who push these things. Because they don't see people as anything but checkboxes. Netflix's The Witcher's Yennefer was a prime example of that. And this Singh guy who's apparently playing Sauron doesn't realize he's become the latest industry purse puppy. Then a bunch of woke white producers will parade around to their other rich white colleagues and go, look what we did, oh, we're so inclusive. And then you wonder why these things don't work and nobody watches them. Because remember, the first season of Rings only had 37% of their viewer base actually finishing the season. So that's a lot of money being spent on CGI and sets that less than half of your viewer base even saw. Of course, there will be people who will push back and say, well, in the book, Sauron's depicted as ambiguous mostly. He can also shapeshift to become any form, so him being a brown man is not really out of the realm of possibility, and you're right. Sauron's race are not technically any specific color. When I was growing up and watching the movies, I saw Sauron and I always kind of looked at him sort of how Final Fantasy does black mages. They don't really have faces, they just have this smoke where their head should be, which is really cool to me. But Tolkien would explain in his books how characters like Sauron worked. He said, and I quote, "Their shape comes of the knowledge of the visible world, rather than of the world itself. And they need it not, save only as we use raiment. Therefore the Valar may walk, if they will, unclad, and then even the Eldar cannot perceive them, though they may be present. But when they desire to clothe themselves, the Valar take upon them forms some as male and some as female. With the Valar came other spirits whose being also began before the world, of the same order of the Valar but less degree." End quote. But it should be stated that Tolkien's son Christopher, who edited his father's work, did state that when Sauron became human, he would take the form of a man with the fairest of skin. Meaning that once Sauron actually became a human in order to blend in, he did choose to be a white man. Which makes sense. I mean, in Tolkien's original works, the lands of men are predominantly all white, which isn't racist, by the way. Because obviously, Tolkien's works were based off of his origin of birth, which was England. And especially back then, it would have been overflowing with predominantly white people. It's the same thing with The Witcher and its creator Andrzej Sapkowski. That story is largely white only, and again, it's not racist because it's based on Poland, which is where Sapkowski is from, and the neighboring countries around him were all Slavic and white too. But of course, once these things get into gender activist hands, everything becomes gabagoo and nothing matters anymore but the message. And remember that back in November, that Sapkowski admitted that he even tried to give Netflix's writers some notes when they were adapting his work, and they smiled, took his notes, and then threw them in the garbage. And the results speak for themselves. The Witcher, like Rings of Power, are shows that don't care about their legacies. They're just franchises with built-in fan bases that can now conveniently be hijacked by activists in order to push agendas. And according to the Fellowship of Fans, as per their depiction of what Amazon is doing with Sauron in Season 2, they claim that Sing will play the ethereal and angelic version of Sauron, and in flashback sequences within Season 2, Sing will have long hair and short hair in the present. The Fellowship also confirms per their sources that the rings will be forged in Season 2 as well. And their sources go further stating that Sing's version of Sauron will appear in Episodes 7 and 8. He will also be present during a massive battle, will appear in flashbacks, and will have an important scene with Galadriel and Celebrimbor. And if you don't know who Celebrimbor is, he's the guy who actually forged the rings. In the Monolith Shadow of War games, Celebrimbor is who Talion is tethered to during those games, which is why you're allowed to do all the cool stuff that you do. But to be real with you, making Sauron brown isn't only racist for all the reasons I already explained, it also makes no sense story-wise either. If this guy wants to stealth his way through Middle-earth without raising eyebrows, he definitely shouldn't be a brown guy. If we're going by the original works of Tolkien here, everybody would be white. And I don't know about you, but if the one brown man in all of Middle-earth just waltzed through a city, people would immediately be like, hey, that guy looks different. It's so stupid, dude. And then this brings up the question of what about the other Sauron in Rings of Power? Well, does that matter? Probably not, because that guy wasn't diverse enough, even though he'd absolutely have a much easier time moseying through Middle-earth undetected than a literal Indian man in a sea of white faces. But don't think about that, dear viewer.
Don't ask questions. Just consume product and then get excited for next product.
And this then makes me wonder if Amazon is still going to bang this stupid drum when it comes to Rings of Power. Are other potential upcoming franchises saved from this heresy? Take Warhammer 40K, which is currently being adapted into a live-action universe on Amazon Prime. I did a video on this recently, but to catch you up quickly, Henry Cavill will be executively producing the entire universe as well as starring in it, but we don't know which role yet. Anyway, he's a lifelong fan of Warhammer, and he's also very aware of how woke activist writers work. since he was Geralt in that Abomination Netflix shout-out too. And I would wager Henry is doing everything in his power to ensure the gender study writers don't infiltrate Warhammer somehow. Cause nothing would destroy the brand more than having the writers of Rings of Power getting their grubby little mittens on 40K. And it would be a damn shame too as well. And I know I'm cynical, but you gotta agree that whenever you hear something you're interested in is getting adapted into a movie or show, your immediate thought is no longer, oh boy, I can't wait. But instead you're probably thinking, how will they screw this one up too? And it sucks that it has to be something we ask ourselves, but it's true. Amazon in general just doesn't make much sense to me anyway. They're like a Russian roulette of content, and every press of the trigger you don't know if you're about to get the most base thing you've ever seen, or the wokest of woke. How the hell does stuff like Reacher and The Terminal List exist on the same platform as Rings of Power? And I truly weep thinking of a Warhammer 40K live-action universe that gets run into the ground like Power has. Screen Rant recently asked the question, how would a Warhammer 40K live-action universe even work? It's simple, and let me answer this for you. First, you respect the source material. You get writers who love the property and are fans first, and then you ensure that no identity political agenda gets pushed in. Screen Rant explains in their article that they're hopeful for a 40K universe, but they wonder if it can be pulled off. And they say that Warhammer is for everyone, and they're right, it is. It's why I'm someone who champions that you can see yourself in people who don't look like you. Go ask the millions of fans who don't look like Goku if they practiced screaming in their garages as kids, hoping that they would turn Super Saiyan if it mattered that Goku looked how he did. It doesn't matter if you pander with a character that looks like someone else. What matters is that the quality of the person beneath the skin is good and noble. If I lived how these woke activists do, then I couldn't enjoy stuff like Japanese games. Cause I'm not Japanese, but who cares? I've vibed with and loved many characters made within those games' worlds. We need to eradicate this very binary, weird way of thinking that we need to push diversity for the sake of it when it does nothing. Obviously, Warhammer 40K's live-action universe will definitely have people of color in it, and women fighting alongside men because it's lore accurate. But I freaking hope that they don't make every leader or person in charge a woman and all the idiot characters men. Seriously, Rings of Power could have become the most amazing show ever made if they had respected Tolkien, but they didn't. Warhammer has the ability to do what Rings never could, and like I said in my other video, it has the potential to become the new industry standard. But then again, speaking of industry standards, what does that even mean anymore? Especially when the industry at large is rotting with all kinds of bad decisions. In video games alone, you have PR firms ruining stuff all the time. Look at this article from GameIndustry.biz titled, 3 Considerations for Improving Diverse Game Narratives and Characters. And they talk to a PR firm's head about how they go about doing this exactly. And this article, from the get-go dude, is annoying. It says immediately, in the past decade, video games have gotten visibly more diverse than titles with just straight white men as the player character or on the box art. And more diverse looking games doesn't always mean that narratives have necessarily gotten richer or less problematic, especially when many major studios still consist of predominantly white teams. This guy should work for Rings of Power's writing team because he would fit right in with stuff like this. They even at one point bring up how just making a villain's skin color black is now problematic. But this is what I mean when you put this thing against Rings and Warhammer's potential future. These people need to stop looking at others as only skin deep. Evil people can come in all shapes and sizes. I guarantee you out there right now, there is the most devious midget probably terrorizing people as we speak. I don't care what color you are, what you identify as, or your political party. But saying crap like making villains people of color is problematic is just stupid. And so is making Sauron a brown guy in a sea of white people. Most of the time, the pandering is so bad it retroactively snaps back and flies in the other direction and becomes even more racist, such as Rings did, and oftentimes these consulting firms just make stories worse. This PR firm's head responds to the black villain comment by saying, "You're not asking can we have a black villain, but can we have a black villain who does not represent certain stereotypes that will make our audience misunderstand our intentions around their villainy?" What are you even talking about? So if the villain is black, they can't what? Be a criminal or a murderer? This is how you end up with a villain that says nothing because you don't want to step on any toes. Then you have movies like Guardians 3, where the High Evolutionary is just the most sadistic and awful person to ever exist, who also isn't redeemable in any way. His skin color means nothing when it comes to his character. He is simply a monster who sees others as beneath him. You can say the same for Amazon's other show, The Boys, where Homelander is a terrible person. His evilness is awful because of who he is regardless of his skin color. He's just an awful, irredeemable man. Can we stop tippy-toeing around this whole race and stereotype thing when it comes to characters? I actually welcome the idea of more people of color villains, because why not? All skin colors of people have awful human beings within them already. And honestly, it would be more interesting to see that diversity be represented in both the good and bad sides of casting. This PR firm's head then tries to use probably one of the worst examples in modern gaming, which is Angrboda in God of War Ragnarok, who is randomly a young black girl within a universe where they're tackling Norse mythology. Do you know what Norse people look like? They look like this. Angrboda makes absolutely no sense. This PR head then said, for me looking at a black character in a game where she feels that same way, it will absolutely be seen and resonated with by people of color and by black girls who identify with Angrboda. So many places are afraid to even make a commentary on things, because of some fear that mentioning something is bad, but not mentioning something is more uncomfortable. First off, what young child black girl will actually play God of War Ragnarok? The game is rated M. Secondly, Angrboda rightfully got criticism because her existence makes absolutely no sense given the context of the world. She was just a character that shouldn't have existed within that setting. Sure, if God of War was tackling African mythology, it makes sense. But Norse? That makes about as much sense as making Sauron an Indian man. I could keep going through this article, maybe I'll save the rest of it for a future video, but as it stands, these people truly do only see others for their skin color, and they don't realize just how condescending and racist it is to think of them this way. We're not saying people of color can't exist within media, but when you put a small black girl in Norse mythology, or make the whitest of main villains like Sauron an Indian guy, fans have every right to raise their eyebrows and ask what the hell is even happening anymore. In Rings of Power's case, nothing short of an entire staff purge will fix that show. I think we can all agree on that. That entire thing is cooked from the inside out already, and I would be amazed if Rings manages to secure a third season. And in terms of Warhammer, I pray that Henry Cavill is able to keep the forces of chaotic wokeness out of the writer's room, or we could be witnessing an implosion 10th the size of Rings. And if Warhammer falls, nothing is safe anymore. Alright, I'm done for now. If you enjoyed what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe to help the channel out. Thanks to my patrons for their undying support, and I'll try to get a few more videos out before the end of the year. As always, take care of yourselves, question everything, and I'll see you in the next one.